like 9K uh,
Mm-hmm.
combat power.
Yeah.
Not much difference in. I mean, a little bit of arcane power difference and a little bit of int difference, but that's about it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's not too game earth shattering or something, so
Yeah,
we can work around that. We'll just say that you haven't been sitting still and you have still been making improvements.
yeah.
All right. Okay, so well, give me a little bit of intro, I guess, on what kind of player you are. Did you just come back this event, and what's kind of like your overall goal with the game and with your character, I guess.
So I did come back just for the burning event because I read about the Terror Link and actually did the Terror Link on my other account. Then I was sick of how messy it was with various characters, so I just decided to start fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And
What do you mean with messy,
so
by
it's
the way? Just
what was that
what do you mean by messy?
messy in terms of like characters since like 2018 without any meaningful progress. I hadn't unlocked stuff on half the characters, no bosses, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured I at least have a better mindset going into playing this game than I did before. So I just completely started fresh.
Right.
I realized I could take advantage of the 1 to 100 events and the Terrible Link and
Mm-hmm.
actually make some progress rather than make a character, get it to 200, not even get it to 201, and then quit it, and then go to the next one.
That's kind of like the pattern that you had before.
Yeah, that was my big bad. Couldn't find a
Mm-hmm.
main, couldn't ever really make any meaningful progress outside of, oh, look, I get the Terra Burning Fafnir set, and that's about it.
Well, meaningful to whom, right? If you want to just experience many characters and you're hoping that the fifth job pays off and then it doesn't end up paying off, so you pick a new one, is that like devoid of value to you? Like, is because you're mentioning like meaningful value. A lot of times, what happens in the game is that people will. Some people will just, be completely free, independent brain and be like, I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want because I don't care what anyone else says. But sometimes, and then that could be a bit too much. But sometimes people also get a bit too much in the mindset of like, well, if I'm not specifically pushing towards the furthest boss in the game, and if that's not my overarching goal, then I might as well not be playing or something. So I'm trying to kind of see where you're at in terms of you want to find a main, or do you feel like you need to find a main?
Back then it was I wanted to find a main. It was yeah, I want to go do like hard lucid or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and but I never put in the work that would get me there
Yeah.
because back then I always thought, oh my gosh, it's too much work, and then that's when I would just start a new character over, and then I would think, oh, this is the time
Yeah.
that that'll happen, but it never did over several years and several burning events. But going into
And how do
this,
you? Yeah, I guess different from now, right? Trying to see if we can break the pattern, right?
yeah,
Where do you think is it the overarching time commitment? Did you just not enjoy the characters? Did you not get the right connections to play with other people, and you didn't want to do it solo? Like, what do you think mostly led to it, or a combination of the above, I guess?
I think it was primarily the lack of a main because I've gotten better over the years about not being a complete altaholic, which I know altaholicism can work in MapleStory because of Legion, but
Mm-hmm.
it was never like personally fulfilling, like to make progress through the game when I just kept restarting over and over. Even though, yeah, it helped push my Legion forward, but it never really pushed me into even now with Hexa out. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
finally getting into the Arcane River content. Like I just finished Lackline,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like I am enjoying the game 1,000 times more than I used to.
Okay.
Mainly because I, one, I enjoy the class I play, and two, then I keep making progress nonstop
Mm-hmm.
since like I started 2 weeks ago, I think it was.
Okay. Yeah, you want the Legion to be something that supports your main, not become the thing that happens because you can't find the main, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So you're not opposed to playing other characters as long as you you know that you found that main. You're not like
Yeah,
just
pretty
desperately.
much.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
now
you can
I
make them
can
functionally for your account rather than as a desperate
exactly.
attempt to hit your main. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's been like that in all the games I play, like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14, all that. I finally found mains in every single one, and now
Mm-hmm.
I can actually play every game I play, especially now MapleStory. I'm doing bosses I never even thought I would get to do, which I've played this game since since I was like 6 in like 2005, or pretty much as soon as it came out.
Uh-huh.
And it was always like I never actually knew how to play the game well, but now it's been much more enjoyable because I feel like I understand the systems more, at least
Mm-hmm.
in this lower level. Not really the end game systems, but it's been better and much
Okay.
more enjoyable.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're finding your enjoyment. And is that in part because of the Lynn as a class?
Yeah, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple enough. It's got some burst skills, but not too many. I mean, all I use is swipe. That's my or strike. That's the name. That is
Strike,
pretty
yeah.
much the only attack that
Gotcha.
I use, but it's still enjoyable somehow because the cooldowns like Predator's Blow, Raid, Beast
Mm-hmm.
Rage every 2 minutes. It imparts enough in to make it enjoyable.
Okay. Yeah, it breaks up the monotony enough, right? To just not be
Yeah.
like jump attack, jump attack, jump attack, and that's
Yeah.
like all. Yeah. No, I've heard the same from because I was training. I do like half an hour training a day, and then there was a Lynn in the same map. So and they were in their 280. So I was wondering like how are you feeling? You know, because it's pretty make or break. They've been playing Beast Tamer for years,
Yeah.
and it's just like, oh, by the way, we're redoing the whole class. Enjoy, and that could be a moment where you're like, I'm leaving this character now because all my invested time is wasted now because I just don't like this character anymore.
Yeah.
And they were very afraid, like what you're saying is that it would be like too simple and too brainless going into it. But then with the timing and the positioning and the extra dash possibilities and the flying, and there is still enough there for them to find that glory of old BT and feel more relevant and a bit more secure in the game, the character not just suddenly breaking as easily or being outdated, being outpaced by the game and not being able to keep up with power creep and that kind of stuff. Even though it is significantly different, they're feeling better and better as it goes on about not feeling forced to like leave that investment behind because it's just too different from what they originally picked as a class. So I mean, I'm glad that you're enjoying it, and there's some similarities there in how you're enjoying it as well, or how you're experiencing it. So so which are the bosses that you're doing now?
This morning I did just unlock Chaos Rudibus, so I just threw on a practice mode, and when did Crimson Queen, I got it down to about 40%. I think it's like a slow burn to lower the health, but I think my issue is mechanics, and that's pretty much my issue with any of the harder bosses, like relatively harder per se, but
Yeah.
like
Harder
Chaos
than
Pink
what you
Bean.
used to. Yeah.
Yeah, Chaos Zac, Chaos Pink Bean, Chaos Rudibus,
Mm-hmm.
all those sort of ones. It's more mechanical issues because even in like Magnus normal, I still get hit by the meteors sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and then I still can clear it, but I definitely still mess up mechanically. But I feel like
Well,
that's
yeah,
just
there's two
something
things
time.
at the same time. Yeah, it's practicing for you to you're putting your character in a new environment, so you have to move completely differently than freely in a map just dashing around. You have far more confined in your movement and your positioning. And then at the same time, you're doing bosses that either you did long time ago or you never did. So you're getting, or that have been overhauled since then. So, all of those things combined. Basically, you're doing two things at once, right? So once you get more competent in one of them, the other one will get way more of your brain power and way more of your attention, and you'll see much more progress in the other one as well, whichever one happens to come first, right? Once you figure out Magnus, as like what his patterns are, how big his hitboxes are, the fact that you can duck the blue strike, I don't know if you know about that one. Once all of that kind of fits into place, now you can just focus on, okay, how does this character deal with that space that is available to me? And then that can go much faster. Or the other way around, if you fuck around with your mobility a lot and you figure out, like, being immune to knockback for some skills, for example, for some characters is useful. Cleansing stuff, healing stuff, and then knowing that you're safe on that, you don't have to worry about those things for a little bit, and then just purely focusing on the boss's mechanics. Either way, it's going to take some weight off your shoulders, and you're going to be able to see through the fog. there's some extra circumstances there, especially when you're bossing in terms of like setup with visibility and everything. I don't know if you've looked into that at all.
Yeah, I use the or like at least the effect transparency a bit more. It really does help. I don't like it like completely down, but I have it enough that I can see mechanics coming.
Yeah, there's also like character outline and boss outline. I don't know if you've experimented with those a little bit.
I have not. I forgot to reactivate that on this account.
Because there it is, like if you have the monster outline and then your regular mobbing, it can be very distracting and almost like borderline seizure inducing because everything is like lightning or like rainbow flashing at you. But for some bosses, especially if you have some bigger effects that can cover up the boss, just seeing the outline of the boss could be enough to recognize the pattern for an attack and allow you to respond faster. And then the character outline is just, yeah, you can just try it, see if it helps you at all. Maybe you only want it in certain bosses, not in other bosses. But it is stuff that you could just play around with. That and also the damage notation in some bosses, just having all of the lines appear. It looks cool, but excuse me, sometimes it can produce like situations where you are limiting your visibility, right, on patterns, on recognition. Like I'm thinking about at Magnus, for example, if you have a lot of walls of numbers, they can obfuscate the visibility in terms of the balls falling, and you can only see them maybe a little bit later, and that can actually lead to you getting hit just because you have an extra half a second or something before you can respond, right? So in certain bosses, that can make quite a big difference. I'm just saying there's multiple aspects. It's not just like, well, there's like your mechanical skill, there's your how familiar you are with your character, how familiar you are with the boss. There's even like ping and delay, like technological delays, and then there's also the visibility aspect. There's also a whole thing, and then there's party composition, if you want to get really into it. So there's many levels in which you can make things easier or harder for yourself. But just be aware of all of those possibilities in terms of certain bosses might be trickier for your character, right? You might get countered by certain things. Your main thing is going to be anything that blocks healing, right? Is going to put a lot of your kit a little bit offside for a while. So that's the main thing I think that you have to deal with as a Lynn. But I've heard very positive things about it, people making it as a boss meal and enjoying it quite a bit. It's also probably because boss meals, for most people, they don't want the most complicated character. They just want to log in, kill the thing, log out, sell the crystals first, and then log out. And it seems like the Lynn does that pretty well. We're a little scared about it being solo weak, right? Because supports tend to solo kind of underperform. Bishop has double infinity, so has been, as long as it's funded enough, strong enough. But it seems like because of Lynn's mechanic boosting herself when she's solo, actually keeps up quite well with other supports, and especially with hybrids, maybe even overperforming some hybrids. So that's good it's good to see the positioning of the character. So I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Definitely.
Okay, so as an overall, like you as a player, are you thinking about, so I don't know if you have friends you're playing with, if you're trying to join a guild, you're not in a guild right now, how do you see that in terms of your overall playing of the game? Because some people play like irregular hours, or so they don't want to be either dependent on other people or like a burden to other people because they don't know if they can contribute. Some people want to play mostly solo. Some people have a big group of friends, right? How do you kind of see that?
I'm pretty much completely solo in this game. I do work pretty long hours most of the days. Like my 3 days off that I get are when I do the bulk of my gaming and everything. And I have actually kind of put MapleStory as a priority over everything else, just because I've been enjoying it so much. But eventually, I would like to get in a group. It's not like a major like driving force, I would say, because I'm still enjoying doing everything solo. I've been able to progress on bosses enough.
And you're hyper burning this character?
Yes.
Yeah, so you will be able to keep progressing quite far. I know if you saw the previous session, but we were talking about like the bosses and the regular kind of like the step up from the weaker bosses to the harder ones. And you can, even if you're not playing insanely out of your brain, probably realistically solo very clearly up until hard Hard Lucid, probably. Maybe around normal Will Hard Lucid is when most people start like, okay, now this is getting crazy. Especially if you're support, you're gonna run into that a little bit earlier, right? But even then, like a duo or something can already, if you're strong enough, you know what you're doing, you're upgrading, you're practicing. You're very strong duo support, right? So if you find someone who is strong enough but doesn't want to go through the whole thing, you know, like a whole half-hour run, and is okay with letting you, you know, do enough damage in the time during the boss fight, just even finding one person could be enough to get your clears in. But that would have to, then that would go into, like, how do you feel about... Because some people, especially playing support, they will feel like they're getting carried. Although, if you look at the maths are behind it, most supports actually bring more damage to a party, especially if you're multi-sport. So not as much you, but if you're like playing a bishop or a Connor or something, then you're actually bringing more total damage into the party you than any other individual person. So you're actually carrying the party. But because of how the metric works with the orbs, I don't know if you've seen about that, like the red dot, blue dot, green dot situation.
I have not seen that.
So if you're bossing now, you get a dot next to your name, colored based on the percentage of the damage that your party has done, how much you've done as a percentage of that to the boss during the fight. And you need to reach a certain amount, otherwise when the box is opened at the end or the boss is killed at the end, depending on how the drops work, you don't get any drops. And the sad thing is that it's really just the direct damage that you do. So supports early on can kind of struggle with, they can technically access bosses and they will be, you know, adding enough damage to the party by far to join it. However, because they themselves directly don't deal as much damage, sometimes the party will have to wait, or they were like at risk for falling below that threshold and then not getting the drops at the end, which is of course, you know, kind of horrible, because then you lose your weekly clear and you don't get any returns for it, so then your progress is stifled when you're the one who needs it more. But that's because that metric is set up a little bit poorly. So there's a green dot which says you have done 10% or more, and then the blue dot says that you're between 5 and 10%, which is enough to get drops, but it just means you're like, you know, you're clear right now, but you could fall underneath the blue dot, which would be the red dot, which means you're under 5% of the total damage of the boss. So supports are basically, mostly... So if you're duoing or something, it's almost impossible to fall below that, right? But if you're doing like a 6-man party, and there might be some people in there who are technically strong enough to solo it, but they just want fast runs, and they're not really looking out... They're only looking out for number 1, and not really for number 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Then you could end up, especially with parties with randos, in situations where they're not really letting everyone get across the finish line together, and it could be a better idea of looking more in terms of, you know, friends within communities, within alliance, within guild, that kind of stuff, to find people who are just more, you have a more direct connection with them, and they'll be more forthcoming in terms of letting you get your rewards in these kind of boss fights.
LA.
So that was just something to think about once you get into the transitionary phase, when you're like, okay, now solo just kind of takes forever to get to the next boss, and I want to start looking for parties. Something to like protect yourself in those situations, basically.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So having come back, are there some concepts, some things you have picked up, some things you've seen over the last 2 weeks where you're just really confused and you want those things just kind of like worked out before we get into any specific details on your account? Kind of concepts, systems, that kind of thing?
Not that I can think of at the moment. It's mostly just like the what's it called? The content after Arcane River, like the newer stuff with like Cernium and all that. But that's so far out, I'm not even really worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I feel like I have a better grip of systems. I haven't really looked up like what specific stats Lynn will want, what I specifically need, but I feel like over the time that I played, I have a general idea of what I should focus on in terms of stats, gear, what to go for, all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for Lynn specific things, there's probably, I don't know if you've joined the class Discord, but those are typically pretty useful. I have more, you know, I usually deal with things in a more general manner. Mm-hmm. You know, like how does gear progression work in general? That's like 99% of that for most classes is the same. Some classes have some exceptions, of course, but that is pretty straightforward. Like, how does damage work? Where does damage come from? You'll have to know specifically for your character. It's a good idea to just read all your skills, right? Kind of like see, well, how much base crit rate do I have? Do I have hidden IED, for example? That's very important, right? Do I debuff the boss, and does that add a lot of IED, for example? Just to know if you're talking about numbers in terms of functionally, in terms of like what actually gets put out versus sometimes what the stat window shows, because it's not always 100% accurate, right? If we're looking at a stat window, even though, you know, it's not accurate because you said you updated it, but it didn't update for some reason. Thank you, Imgur. But like combat power, for example, is really just kind of like a gear score. It's it's a better measure, I think, than main stat intellect, but it's still a very imperfect one and incomplete one. So until you feel like you really understand that number and where it comes from and what it does, it's a good idea to not put too much weight into it. You know, someone else who has double your combat power could be dealing half your damage, right? So if they're within the same class and they have all of the same other stats, then you can probably compare the combat power somewhat one-to-one. But yeah, then that kind of shows how limited the predictive power of that stat is, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, main stat, again, that's also, it's a pretty predictive number, not the best. Level has become less and less predictive because of burning events. So someone could be 260 and could honestly barely be able to kill normal Lotus and Damien, or someone could be level 260 and they could be able to solo Hard Darknell, you know, and that's quite a gap between between those two bosses. So it is yeah, that is, or I think actually mathematically there could maybe be people who could be like soloing the Black Mage with yeah. So that is just a wild gap, and again, it's part of the predictive power, right? But it's definitely not any kind of be all end all. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that we don't have that, where there's just one number that predicts everything. It definitely makes things more complicated, but it also means that people can't like just like shortcut progress, and you have to in some way try to understand how everything works and how everything connects with each other. But yeah, things like hyperstats, and that all just follows from things. So you didn't have any like specific questions written down, or?
Not really. I feel like I've gotten like the importance of like IED, ensuring your crit rate's high enough, crit damage, factoring into all of it. I feel like I've gotten that better. It's more just like a overall, what would be the best way to progress my account, even outside of just my main. Like there are some things like how to reach like higher goals, more like clearing other bosses on it up to, I guess, 260 at this point, because that's the cap for burning, but also like where other parts of my account, not necessarily just like other alts, I guess, like all the mules I made for the 1 to 100 event for link skills. I found it's Grandest Library, and they had pretty much a list of like what would be best for training, what's best for bossing. I tried to go in the middle of both, but
what do you mean exactly by that? Like, what's best for mobbing, best for bossing?
They have a list of link skill builds that shows like which specific classes give more benefit for training or bossing.
Yeah. So there are so basically we're going into, because I don't know, you used to be in the chat like a long time ago, and you're like coming back now. I used to work a lot with those commands. Do you remember how all that works and how to find those?
I don't remember the names of the commands.
No, that's totally reasonable. I mean, how dare you? How dare you?
I know,
your bookmarked websites. As soon as you open a browser, all of my resources should be open. Yeah. Obviously. That makes sense. Because it is very easy if you're just coming back. I think Grandest Library is actually pretty good from what I've seen. It's very easy for some things in MapleStory, though, that get kind of outdated. It's a lot of work to keep everything updated. I'm struggling with it a lot. And then expanding also for all the new stuff coming out while also maintaining it's a lot of work. So it is definitely easy to find something that looks well made and it looks good, but it could just be forgetting something. So I think even though, but I don't want to like second guess other people who make things, and my stuff also isn't perfect. But I think it's a good idea to just kind of like talk through the things, maybe like how you understand them and what you found, just to double check to make sure your understanding is solid. And then I think when all of that is solid, because a lot of times people have a lot of questions also about like equip specifically and what to work on there, right? I think a lot of that flows from understanding where damage comes from and how upgrading works and all of that. And then that, once we've all established that, I think that'll flow more freely into like, and then what does that mean for the equips? And then that'll be something that we can go through faster. And I think also you'll be able to go through it yourself more quickly rather than me just telling you do this, do this, do this. Because my approach is very much like teaching a man to fish rather than giving you fish, right? It's not very self-serving, because if I just give you fish, then when you're hungry, you need to come back. So it's kind of like shooting myself in the foot. But I just believe much stronger in just giving people the tools to be able to succeed on their own. But I'm always here for for advice and for extra support and all that. But I feel like it's more satisfying to be able to play in your own pace rather than be too much like dependent on other people.
That makes sense.
But yeah, the whole of the account is a good question. You want to make sure that you are not playing other characters too much and then taking time away from your main, and you want to make sure that you are playing the other stuff in your account enough, because ultimately you're trying to make your main character stronger, right? And if that means doing other things than playing your main, it's maybe not something you always want to do, but it's good to know whether that is what you should be doing. So I don't have a mental like calculus of everything, like this is how much percentage total damage this is and how much total percentage this is, and this is when the exact breakpoint is for these things. So what I have is general milestones and general numbers to work towards, and these will all be interconnected through all of my commands to make sense as a whole, if that makes sense. So
that does.
So the progression grid is one that I'm constantly tweaking if it needs to. Of course, with New Age coming out, the last big update, it was a lot of shifting that happened, right? Especially because of burning up to 260, level became way less important. Combat power was introduced, but you'll see that I have not put combat power on here. It's kind of like an exception, but one of the main reasons why I didn't put it on there is because there was the big example I always give is there was a contest in, I always forget if it's CMS or TMS, but they basically had to try to kill bosses with as low as possible combat power, and there were two people who were able to blow up C-Val in like one burst in like 10 seconds with it was TMS with 0 combat power. Kind of going to show that you can manipulate that number very strongly without it having predictive property. To get into the reason that people can do that is because the attack on your weapon is a final multiplier to your combat power. So if your weapon has 0 attack, the combat power will always come out as 0, even if everything else is upgraded. So you can kind of manipulate it. Same thing with stats, right? You could, I remember there was a video from Steve a long time ago where he was like, 3k stat character blows up all of CRA, but he would use like a special ring that would basically turn your stats, turn your damage range into a certain amount for a short duration, and then it would just blow up the boss during that timer. This is the way that you can, it makes for like a nice video and epic video and all that, but it also kind of goes to show that just because something is part of the predictive power, it's not necessarily the whole picture. So I've therefore distilled what I think is like all of the important numbers, not literally all of them, because then this list would be like 3 times as long, which is just completely unworkable. It's already kind of a lot. But once you understand like all of these individual things and you understand like the sources of them, the mechanics behind them, then you have everything, all of the things that will contribute to your character getting stronger in one place, and that'll help you make sure that you are not spending your time in an inefficient manner in terms of with the same amount of time being able to make more gains by working on a different system instead, if that makes sense.
Yep,
so level is
I feel like I've been good to not focus on the combat power and more so on like my percentage IED, my percentage crit rate, damage, crit damage, like all that, rather than the combat power, because I know that's just like the additive number of whatever my gear has for an arbitrary number for power, versus what is going to actually be affecting and increasing my damage through the stats instead.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest multiplicative compounding variables are the ones that give... We call it final damage. It's a little bit of a misnomer because there is a stat called final damage, which is very class heavy and not really impacted. We should probably call it total damage, but shifting that to people, making people call it that now, especially for how much people may or may disagree with everything I say, is going to be pretty much impossible. But those multipliers are the most impactful early on, right? So IED, especially when you're bossing, is a final damage or total damage reducer, depending on how much armor the boss has, how much PTR the boss has. So if you undervalue this, that basically just means that all the other metrics have to work extra hard to compensate for the loss of this stat. But of course, when you increase this stat, it doesn't show any range increase. It doesn't show any combat power increase. So it is rather unintuitive to put it so upfront, and it doesn't help you with mobbing at all, or very, very rarely, very, very barely. So it is counterintuitive to think of that as an important stat early on, but then people try to boss, and it's like, wow, I can't kill these bosses at all, I'm so weak. But maybe all they just need is 1 or 2 lines more of IED on their entire kit, and maybe they could just do like 6 times their damage. It is that impactful early on. So Legion level is included in here, not because just a 1k Legion level gives you a bunch of damage, but because that connects to having a bunch of characters building up, and having their member bonus when they're in the Legion, having the grid bonus, and having the link skills. That's all compounding together as part of a damage multiplier to your whole, to your character, but to every character in your account, right? So for the Legion approach, I am very much in the realm of looking at account progress rather than specific character progress. Even if you know you're going to specifically just play one main and that's it, I still want to build the Legion in terms of building a big basis and foundation for your entire account, so that every single next character you build for your Legion is just a little bit faster, and then in turn that'll just mean that you get to those breaking points, to these breaking points of like 6k and then later 8k and then never 12.5k, because that's ridiculous, but like towards 9k maybe, that you get there more realistically, and then that whole will support your main character faster, kind of like a slower to the halfway point but faster to the final point kind of approach essentially.
Yeah, I feel like I may be focusing a little too heavy on link skills, even though they're important, but I feel like I could be leaning a bit more into like Legion stats, grid bonus, all that.
So that's why I put them in the same thing, because every character both unlocks Legion and link skills, and all of them also give you grid bonus if you put them in the Legion grid, right? So I thought it'd be more interesting to just basically have all the stats in the same grid. So you see the clear boxes are the link skills and the green boxes are the Legion member bonus, and then just organize them by what kind of stat do they give, and then basically just organize them based on like what is just priority, what is vital, what is just utility and only good for some characters, what is more for bossing. Typically just comes in a little bit later, especially when you're building your Legion. You want to build your Legion to be able to make sure that you can build your Legion faster. You want to build that snowball. So what does that mean? You just have to build mobbing damage and then the EXP within the damage, right? The general rule of thumb is always you want to make sure you build your damage first so you can kill monsters quicker, and so you can keep killing monsters quicker for a longer time. And once that's solid, then you want to... So it's basically like a quantity over quality thing. You want to maximize your quantity first, and then you can start focusing on the quality. So like the EXP that you get from every kill, or the meso that you get from every kill. You want to make sure that the EXP and the meso you don't go too quickly into, because then you could hurt the quantity, and then in turn you're doing like, instead of 1 times 1.1, you're doing 0.8 times 1.1, and you end up with 0.88 instead of, right? You end up with a lower factor than you started with. And the same thing goes for when you're building your account. You're sure, and this is a good point. You're like around this level. You're sure that you want to progress with this character. It's a good time to start thinking about dropping meso gear and starting building that. The sooner you start building that, the sooner you'll make your money back. That's like the quality part. So you want to make sure that the damage foundation is set, that the quantity that's set. And then once it is, and it can maintain the kill speed, then you can multiply the drops and the meso you get from every drop, and that's when you get that synergy of not losing the kill speed and optimizing the gains per kill. That's when that works and that makes sense for your progress in the game. And we're strong enough, and we can know where those benchmarks are roughly, right? That you cannot suffer any losses on the front end on the quantity. So this is my general advice. Basically, from what I did, and from just arranging the classes, it basically rolled out this general priority of what I think can build you the strongest Legion that can support any character in your account the best. Now, you don't have to follow this, and some of these classes maybe you like training, so you don't want to like burn them or want 0 to 100 them. You actually like training them. And then maybe you skip maybe you skip that one, and then you force burning, mega burning, terra burning, even more onto characters that you don't like as much. And that's usually a good idea when you're building a Legion to think about, is keeping most of the enjoyment and most of the good time to yourself, and then minimizing the amount of just suffering for the greater good kind of thing. Trying to use that on events and stuff like that, so you can just have as little effort in there as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So for Mega Burns, yeah, for starting off at Mega Burns, just level 120. Level 100 is a good spot because you can kill Zakum daily. 105 is a good spot. That's when Monster Park rolls out, so then you can get some decent EXP per day without having to actually fund your character. 120 is what you get your second link skill, and then 140 is a good spot because that's when you get to the S rank for the Legion board. All of those levels and all of those intervals are also here. So you get that S rank, and then because then the next step is basically 200, right, to get to double S. So 200 is good if you have a Terra Burn, and if you're potentially thinking of maybe making a character into a boss mule, if you heard good things about it, if you have time, to do that. It's not necessary. But then you can look at basically the fourth number for level 200, and you can see if it's even a big upgrade compared to your level 3, and if it's something you want to worry about. So a lot of times more of the popular characters for that are like Shade and Hayato, because they jump from 3 to 5% on critical damage and very high up the list. And then more utility characters in terms of mechanic, getting extra buff duration. Sometimes the Mercedes and the Aaron and Evan can be in that list as well, just to get closer to that level 3 link, so that you just from 200 to 210, there's a lot of event EXP that's kind of just like floating around. And again, if it's a character you don't like, you can use those events, because I don't remember what you said exactly, but there was definitely a thing that I wanted to mention where if it's about like priorities and, do I want to spend time on Legion, or do I want to spend time on other things in general or on my main, a lot of that can be kind of upset temporarily by events. And it's a good idea whenever an event comes out just to look at, do I care about this at all? Are there things here that can make me good gains as a player? And if there's only one or two things, then just focus on those one or two things and just ignore all the rest, because events are back to back and they can be overwhelming, and you can get lost very quickly in just trying to do everything. And then what happens is at the end of the event, you just have so much event currency and so many stores, and then you're just like, what do I even buy with all of this? That kind of translates into, you could have done a whole lot less event stuff and still been okay, So it's good to see in the beginning of an event, like, what do I really care about here? My general process is like, what do I really want and what do I need? And then just see how much effort an event actually is, like the first day or 2 or 3, kind of see how much effort it is. And then reassess, like, okay, can I get everything that I need? Cool. Am I okay with doing a little bit extra to get some of the stuff that I want as well? And how much time I'm willing to spend on this? And then basically cut as much into the want as possible so you can just solidly get the need stuff,
Yeah, that makes sense. I think with the, what do they call it? The Dreaming Blackline one, I think is that what it's called? Midnight Party, that's what it is.
Yeah, Midnight, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one. I have been focusing more, because I know the dancing ones are more cosmetic based. Reveries, pretty much more like character stat based, I guess you could say. I feel like I have been focusing on that more intuitively rather than purely just going for like all cosmetics, not stuff that wouldn't increase my power as much.
Mm-hmm.
But like I did focus more on getting like a legendary inner ability with the 2000 reverie fragments.
Mm-hmm.
I with the Go West event with the Maple World 2, where I've been using it to get Karma Flames and just let them stack up.
Mm-hmm.
The arcane fragments or the arcane symbols, and I feel like that's been helping, but I feel like I'm gonna hit a limit with it in terms of like how much it really does help. Because in the beginning, getting like 100 arcane symbols can get you a couple levels.
Yeah.
But then later on, it's much less, and I feel like I'm eventually gonna need to find the real ways to make the progress rather than a lot of gimmies from the events.
Yeah, there were just like little extra. It depends. Like some people will see the basic things that you could do, dailies and weeklies, as that's just standard, and then events are like necessary to actually get your true speed that you're trying to get for something. For some other people, they don't do dailies every single day because, you know, they have a life and stuff like that. They try to do their weeklies most of the time. So the events are kind of more like something to get you closer to what you would be getting if you did them every single day. But yeah, as you get further into the game, you'll realize that 100 symbols as a stack looks like a lot. But, you know, on average, you get 20 symbols a day from a region, and you have 45 per week. So that's around 6.5 per day if you spread that over the days as well. So you get about 26.5 per day. So if you get 100 symbols, even though as a cluster that looks like a lot, that's just the daily symbols for 4 out of the 6 areas. And that's it, right? So it's really just one day's worth of symbols. So in that sense, you also want to look at your currency that you're getting in events is as a term of how much time does this save me? Because some items might, you know, cost you $1 billion, and if you only make 200 mil an hour and you can only play two hours a day, that's like 2.5 days worth of money. But 100 symbols, that looks like more, but is maybe 1 day worth of symbols that only takes you like half an hour. Maybe that is less valuable, right? The problem there is that it gives you an extra day. It pulls an extra day out of thin air, where for the other ones, you'd have to work an extra hour that you would kind of also have to pull out of thin air. So it's not exactly a one-to-one comparison, but a lot of times, if you want to know for sure if something is more valuable to you, you gotta try to like reduce all of it to your most valuable resource, which is your time, right? And see, is something worth 15 minutes? Is something worth an hour? Some items will make sense of how expensive they are, and another item might as well, but if you compare them to each other, one item might end up being way more valuable, like a droplet, for example. Like if you make almost no money, a droplet's like worth 50 mil. But if you're not actively working on arcanes, it might seem overpriced. But if you are actively working on arcanes, it might seem totally worth it. But if you have a lot of currency, it might definitely be worth it. And if you have not a lot of currency, it might be too expensive for you, right? So there's never a guide of like, this item is what you should always get, this item is what you should never get. There's always too many things available, and you can pick whatever makes sense for your account. The one thing that's probably almost always useful, that if you're even asking about it, it probably is like node stones. Because your V-Matrix just takes forever to get done, and even when it gets done, there's other V-Matrixes for other characters, so you're never truly done. You're going to be making special nodes, you're just going to keep going. So node stones are probably the main thing that you want to... And if fragments were ever in stores like these, they would be in there as well, like high on that list. But even when it comes to symbols, a lot of times they can be a bit too expensive for how much they give. They can look really good, especially if you're newer to the game, but as soon as you start thinking about how much time does this really save me, you'll probably find that some of those, although they don't seem overpriced, are probably still not quite worth their cost.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
So yeah, it can be that you're in a situation where you're like, okay, at the end of the event, you bought out all of the useful stuff, and you might as well just buy some symbols with your leftovers just to get a little bit more, progress there. That's cool. But But yeah, most of that is just time gated. It's just dailies and weeklies. Are you doing those for the symbols?
Yes, I am. I just got the lock line one, so I've been doing all three. I've been getting the 200, 400, 600 kills for each zone,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a lot of free node stones from the burning event, so
Mm-hmm.
like I already have Vanishing Journey at 10, Choo Choo at 8, and Lockline at 7. So I've kind of hit this is going to take a little bit longer to upgrade now, but
Yeah.
I'm still making sure I get it done like every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like 11, 12 is still decently quick, and then past that, it's definitely slows down. But yeah, you're not at 260 yet with the Cernium symbols, where it starts all over again. Those things, the last level is like 1100 symbols, and you get 10 a day. So,
Oh, good lord.
it's a while. Yeah, it's a whole process.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, so they're really, and again, this ties back a little bit more into like what the game is and a game is designed. The game is very much has in the background a design of building habits for you and building regularity for you and trying to get you to come back every single day and spend at least some time every day doing certain things. And they give you really good value for like your first half hour to 45 minutes of gameplay. But that's just in order to build that habit in you, right? To instill that habit in you. So it's good to stay on top of your own time and be your own time manager in terms of how much time do you really want to spend, how much time do you have to spend, and then just prioritizing within that time, because you just can't do everything because they want you to play 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, right? That's kind of their goal.
Yeah, I feel like I still haven't made the full amount of progress that I should in terms of like opening up everything to do.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm still stuck on this dumb Papulatus quest that I can't figure out why it's not working, but that I need to start the Haven stuff too.
Mm-hmm. For the Absolute gear, you mean?
Yeah, for the Absolute gear. I figure it's gonna be more important once I eventually have this Fafnir gear expire in September, which it's a far way out. I still basically have enough time, but
yeah, plenty of time. Yeah,
it's a little like daunting. You're like, oh geez, this has a deadline. I have to beat this deadline.
That's the second thing, right? So one is like the time gating, and the second one is the clocks and expirations on everything, constantly to put you under that pressure of like, hey, use it or lose it. And it is very important to know that if you're going to be even somewhat regularly playing this game, like 3 months timer on CRA. Like, even now, you're probably, like, within a week, you're going to be killing CRA, and you're going to have your own pieces. So, and then, usually, you probably want to just sit on those for a bit and just abuse the fuck out of the free value that you're getting right now, out of the Starforced and potentialed and maybe even pre-flamed pieces, right? You don't have to spend that money yet, but you can already start building up the backups. You can already start building up the items. So you can replace them if you need to, right? And then towards like Abzo and Lotus, there's a lot of steps right in between these bosses, but you can also say this is all still the batch of early game. These are all really close together. It's not until you get to like mid game and then especially late and end that the steps in between these are actual months to 6 months to year plus for some people. Excuse me. In between moving from one boss to the next one, these early ones can be. Sometimes you can even, progress multiple pieces of content in the same day if once the thing just clicks or once you make like a good upgrade. So, but that's also why again, I'm being a little bit more like cynical here, but that's also why the burn event exists, right? Is to get you to that place in the game where you can have access to all of this content to keep you busy and to maybe also make you feel bad if you miss out on some things, right? So it's good for you to have your general purpose and the general things that you like to do and general things you just don't want to do, and focus around those rather than everything you can do, because you'll just get lost super quickly.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I guess kind of on topic question about gearing. Mm-hmm. Are you able to transfer hammer the burning gear, the 15 potential or the 15 star potential gear, to say an actual piece of Fafnir gear?
Oh, it's a temporary gear, cannot be like used in that sense. You cannot transfer hammer to it or from it, because then that initial value they would give you would like resonate a little bit further. It really is just like as itself. Some of the pieces you can't even upgrade at all, right? Like you can't, or in some ways you can't upgrade them further. You probably can't Star Force it, right? But you can work on the flame and on the potential, but you can't work on the Star Force like that set as well. Otherwise, it give you. It's kind of to protect your progress a little bit as well, because I don't want people to accidentally spend a lot of money on it and then lose it and then not know how it works. But also just to make it clear, like, hey, this gear's here until that date, and then it's gone, and then that's it. That would be cool though. Yeah, then immediately you could transfer. But you'd have to transfer hammer it up into Absolab. But with CRA, we don't do that. We keep the CRA gear for quite a while because of the top-bottom nature, and then the set bonus with the hat makes more sense than to switch completely into Absolab pieces.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess more on a character focus rather than whole wide account. I have been struggling to get the upgrade materials. So, like, I mean, Karma Flames, they come from the Maple World Tour, but I know those are usually like the big flame upgrades, and I've gotten some better ones. I cannot pinpoint exactly which ones right now, but I did get some like decent gains from it. But even just with the regular flames, the red ones, that having like an ample ability to get epic potential stamps outside of the event, stuff like that in the long term, where do I get all that upgrade gear? Besides cubes, I know it comes from bosses.
Yeah, so cubes is bosses, events, and event shops. In the beginning, it's mostly... So, let's start at the basics, right? We have three things. You've got Flaming, you got Potential, and you got Star Force, right? That's like the three main ways of upgrading your stuff. Flaming, honestly, very early on is the least of your worries, honestly. Because most items, or especially early on, there's a lot of items that don't have flame advantage, and on average they're going to get pretty bad flames, so it's really not something you need to be focusing on that much. And also your gear is going to be shifting a lot, maybe from things that can be transfer hammered, maybe not from things that can be transfer hammered. Flames also don't transfer over if you do transfer hammer, so there's a lot of value there lost immediately if you do spend a lot of money on flames. Really, the only thing you want to be focusing on early on in terms of flames is just make sure your weapon has a decent flame, and that's kind of it. Everything else, not that important unless the items are going to stick with you for a longer period of time. And the thing is, when you're just starting out, you don't really know how long things are going to stick with you because you don't really have that reference frame as a new player. So I'm telling you, like, your weapon is going to stick with you for a while, so get a decent flame on that, which you don't have, so that's what I would throw my flames on at this point.
Okay.
And then other than that, anything that is a boss accessory piece that has flame advantage, which are a lot of them, you can flame that as like a secondary source. So that would be like the Condensed Power Crystal, Aquatic Letter Eye accessory, the Acidus earrings, not the Chaos Horntail pendant, although this one has a decent flame, so you can definitely keep that one. Mechanator pendant, which is that's probably the Mechanator pendant that you meant. Yeah, that's an insane flame for a Mechanator pendant. 78 and 5, yeah. There's someone in the community, Rain, who he runs on mules and always pulls some crazy Mechanator pendants. That's like one of the ones that he would have. That's where you can use your flames. Or once you get the permanent CRA gear, once you get the permanent Absolab gear, that's where your flames would want to go. But you can buy flames just all year round in the regular store. They're like 8 or 9 mil each, I believe. The regular powerful flames. So if there is an emergency, you can always like buy a whole bunch of those, but you typically don't. You basically just slowly bring up the flames in your account as you get them from bosses, and then you make really big jumps and you have pretty big projects whenever event shops are out, which is now pretty much year round. You just need the currency, right? And then you can make some really big jumps on the more impressive items. To just keep track of flames, you want to know how flames work and how they're calculated. You talk about the flame score, which is basically the best tool that we have to kind of future-proof the flames, the quality of the flames, and to make sure that you're comparing them one-to-one. Because sometimes it can be difficult to know how much a stat will improve your overall damage versus another one. To keep track of that, we basically have these 3 rows here, so that you can see in a different stage of the game what kind of flame score you're typically aiming for at the top end. Anything more than this would just mean that you're over-investing your money here and you're getting diminishing returns compared to spending it on other things, specifically on other ways of upgrading like Star Forcing and cubing. So you'll see that the weapon here is the highest priority. Flame score for the advantage items, so that'll be like your CRA, your Absolab. You can see the levels of the items here as well. That's what kind of what you want to do. And then the non-advantage items, that's more like, you know, once you get into Golok stuff and once you get into Sweetwater stuff, basically.
So is Commercy still a like major piece of content, or is that kind of gone on the back burner since new stuff's come out?
If you have, in general, I would say there's stuff there that I think is definitely worth skipping. There's stuff there that is definitely worth looking into. If you already have a major account, you already have like connections, you already have carries lined up, it's your 5th or 6th character, you can basically bypass the whole thing and not lose anything, really. I'm kind of at the point where I've kind of dragged 7 characters or so through that whole content, so I'm kind of like at my max there, that I use it highly functionally in very specific instances now. But for most people, especially if you're, you know, progressing more on a more organic fashion, I think it's a really good piece of content to use, especially to get a good face accessory like the Sweetwater Tattoo. I think is a very powerful tool to get your damage up without having to rely on Twilight marks, which really only start dropping from Hard Lucid and Hard Will, and even then you're usually in a party, so you have to split the drops with multiple people, so that can be a tricky piece to upgrade into. Again, if you get carried by someone who already has Berserked and give you, you know, the drop at day 1, then that's a completely different situation. And because of the rarity of Dominator Pendants, I think it also is a decent idea to just get your first Dominator to try to transpose it into a Sweetwater Pendant, and then just upgrade the Sweetwater Pendant so you can, you know, you don't have that pressure on needing to get Dominators every time, because it's very possible that your first Dominator just blows up 17 to 18 once you go past 17 stars, and there could be months in between Dominators. It's just a really bad drop rate for that thing, and crafting them, sadly, is still just pretty tricky for new accounts. Yeah, I think the eye accessory is pretty much offside now because of how easy it is to get Black Bean marks, and how close they would be anyway. So I think that one is definitely not doable. Again, for the pendant, that is mostly, I think, for people who know that they're probably at most going to get into like 260 to 265 area and kind of get stuck there, probably. That will have more value for them. If you know you're going to be sending it and you're going to play a lot of hours, that's also something that probably won't be as useful. But, you know, a lot of people look at the primary use of an item and look if it is ultimately a best in slot item, and if it's not, they try to skip it, which I understand, but like CRA is not best in slot either, but trying to skip CRA would be absolutely stupid because it's so much free damage, right? It's not so much of whether or not you end up with a piece, it's more whether it's a worthy investment and using it as a stepping stone in order to get further into the game where you no longer need it, right? The fact that you no longer need the piece is proof that it was useful, you know, is not proof that it was useless. So I do think a lot of people overlook the content, but a lot of people play the game in a way where they can afford to. But I just hope that advice that they give keeps that nuance rather than just tell everyone that it's useless, because that's definitely just categorically untrue.
Oh, that makes sense. That was the other thing I was going to ask is about Dominator Pendants. Do they drop from normal Arc or Arcarium?
Yeah, so for that drop, I used to have like a little graph here in the dailies where I had like a column with all the most prevalent drops, but then what they did, they added into the game, if you open up the guide and then check the boss line, you can click on the bosses and see like their most prevalent or their most noteworthy drops, and you can see them in there. So you can see if you check normal Arc, the primal is possible, although I don't think I've ever seen one from easy Arc. But because it shares entries and clears with normal Arc, so you'd rather do normal for the higher chance, and then you see also that the Dominator Pendant can drop from that boss. So this way you can kind of see where the general items come from, the type of items. You can see normal Pink Bean, for example, is a daily boss, but has a chance for the Black Bean mark and the belt and the cup. So this is a very valuable normal daily boss that you can do, as well as Arcarium also. As far as normal bosses go, I'd love for you to be able, if you have the time, to do these daily for probably like at least 6 months, just to add up pile of backups, because then you can see where you're getting lucky, where you're getting unlucky, and see which upgrade is even a possibility for your character and which one you just have to find an alternative for. That's kind of the way why I like the Sweetwater setup and all of Commercy is because even if you get unlucky on these things, you'll always have Commercy to fall back on because you get a regular stream of coins, and then you can always reliably buy backups with. No, they could still boom, so that's there's another level of RNG there, but at least you can bypass that first level of RNG with something of a pity system where you're essentially just getting coins all throughout that you can use to buy pieces with later.
Okay, that makes much more sense. That's
Especially,
it's like all the major stuff I could think of right now. I guess you said with your the link skills and the Legion.
Well, we
started
started with flames, right? So the flames, that's where the flames mainly come from. And that's why they're also not so important early on. So then you have the second one is the cubes. So the cubes definitely come from bosses and stuff like that early on. You get more cubes as you go on from event shops as well. You can buy cubes all the way up until glowing and bright, right? Just from NPCs. So there's technically no limit on accessibility there, which leads to a lot of people kind of overbuying on those and then kind of bricking their account in a way that they overspend in what we were talking about before. They overspend on the quantity part and underspend in the quality part, which then slows you down in your progress a lot because basically people overfund their characters, make them too strong. Not just that, but also they tap into more inefficiencies. So what they'll try to do is reach his 25k stat purely with just potential instead of reaching it with Star Force. Because Star Force is scary, especially going past 17 because your items can boom. But why is booming scary? Because you're going to lose a lot big potential. So what if instead of spending that money on the big potential, you spend it on getting the Star Force first though, so you're not losing as much potential when you boom. And then when you gain the Star Force and you've got the risk out of the way, then you spend on the potential, and now you can lock in that potential with a really nice potential. Do it the other way around, right? And because that process takes a little bit longer, that also gives you more time to get more backups, and what more backups leads to is a clearer position of where is my risk the lowest, and that means that pushing there for the Star Force, even though it can boom, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a positive thing, because you can use the value of the backups to cheapen the upgrade in Star Force instead. And there's way more gains to be made in Star Force very early on, because your potential only go up by like 3 or 6% with like a whole tier up and a whole lot of cubes rolling, versus that could just be 1 or 2 stars on an item, which is just a little bit of clicking. So that's why, early on, when it comes to cubing, I think early on you want your weapon, your secondary and emblem to be good, your WSE, right? That's where a lot of your base multiplier comes from. That's where your IED comes from, your damage percentage, your percentage attack. Very rare sources early on. So that's going to have a big impact in your total damage. Once that's solid, that together with completely other systems aside from money, mainly together with your arcane symbols, because that gives you final damage if you have enough, right, to kill monsters within an area, and your V matrix with your boost nodes and everything, that will give you final damage to your skills as well. Those things working together will make you strong enough. They will solidify that quantity. And then you can immediately start working on the quality. You can immediately start working on meso obtain and drop rate once you know for sure that your character is the one that you're going to be playing, at least for the mid to long term, right? If you know that you're definitely going to go to 250 to 260, the sooner you know that, the sooner you lock in, get a good emblem, good secondary. Weapon is sometimes a little bit slower, right? Because you could have a fake weapon like you do, or you could have a weapon that's still going to transfer, and then you don't want to go too hard on the potential, because transfer hammering will reduce the potential level only up to epic, so it might get reduced and you lose that money. But mostly the emblem and the secondary will stay with you for a long time. And then with that damage, you can start working on getting drop rate gear, meso gear, to make sure that you get that quality increased whenever of the time that you're spending, so that you can focus on enjoying yourself rather than just putting in pure more hours to be able to compensate for that loss, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're kind of at that point now where, you probably are spending a little bit everywhere, and it's probably fine. But it's a good idea for the session to be now, so that you can have that direction now, so that you can specifically spend that money in those things. And then once those are on point, then you could just, do whatever the hell you want. If you want to progress quickly, make sure you do all your dailies all the time. Make sure you do all your weeklies whenever you can, right? And then you'll have a whole lot of backups. And then when an event comes, you'll have more money, you'll have more backups, and then you can make big upgrades. And then once you hit those big upgrades from the Star Force and they're kind of like locked in and and going past that will be more risk. Will just be more risky. Then you can start working on the potential. Potential is typically something we work on more, and cubing something we work on more off event, because the cube sales are only twice a year, and we just had our last one, so the next one is probably not until late November. And even then it's only 25% off, which is already less than a 5, 10, 15 for Star Force is, and less than a 30% off is for Star Force. So Star Forcing is typically pretty much only done on event. But again, I think that's a good thing, because that gives you time in between the events that you can build up backups, and then you can see what is the lower risk upgrade that I can make here. And does it make sense for me to do it, right? Don't all upgrade because you can, but upgrade because you need it. If you always upgrade when you can, then you probably won't be able to make upgrades when you need it, because you won't have the resources. So always put the need over the can or over the want, right? Or not always, sometimes you're allowed to splurge a little bit, you're human. Give yourself a break every now and then. But just know that the more often you do that, the harder everything will just have to work if you want to keep feeling that progress throughout the game. The basics of the potential in the beginning, it can be quite hard to find the stamps, what you were talking about, potential scrolls, that kind of stuff. You can use Transfer Hammer. It seems weird, but Transfer Hammer just transfers some things to new items, right, that are 10 levels higher or at the lower end of 20 levels higher, which does include potential and the amount of lines, doesn't include the flame, and includes the amount of stars -1. So if you just give if you find a random epic item, and you reveal it, and it just has 2 lines, whatever, but you give it 1 star, transfer it up, give it 1 star, transfer it up, it can technically be 100% epic potential scroll, right? Which, in the beginning, is in pretty short supply. So don't underestimate the value of items, random items that you find, because if you reveal an item and it's rare, but it has 3 line, now you basically found yourself 100% stamp for a higher level item. So as long as you use those at your disposal, as you have them available, before you kind of commit to the item, right? Because it will overwrite some of the quality of the target item. So for some items, it might already be a little bit too late for your account, right? But for some, it might still come in handy later. If you're trying to, you're trying to go to Absolab, that's level 160 stuff. So if you find anything that's 140 or 150, so anything Pencilier, or anything, from Ranmaru or from Princess No, that's 140. Other 150 stuff that has potential, and it's 3 line, or it has epic potential, then you basically don't have to worry about tearing up that stuff later or stamping that stuff later for potential, because you already have that settled. It's already in your inventory, and then you can think about the other stuff. You can think about, can I flame already? Remember, flame doesn't get overwritten, so you can already start flaming Absolab as you get it, and prepare it for if you want to transfer hammer over. Now, typically, don't transfer hammer over into Absolab anymore because of the Star Force, because there's no more drop in Star Force, and the cost of getting from 10 to 15 is kind of the same. So you really you'd only be like saving some money on maybe 16 to 17, but you have to do an extra star because you lose a star on Transfer Hammer. So I would only Transfer Hammer if you're trying to get potential, maybe epic, to an item, but not so much for the Star Force, unless you're doing the big jump from like 21 down to 20, but that's like way too far for you at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. With the WSE stuff you were talking about, is Princess No's secondary the final level for that, or is there more secondary equipment past that? Or secondary weapon past that?
I believe so, yeah. So I have the Princess No command, just ! Princess No, or ! Secondaries opens this as well. And I should have the old Beast Tamer one replaced with the Lynn. Where did I put it, though? I don't know if there's any logic to where I... must have already looked past it.
On the bottom.
Oh, yeah, here, yeah. I was looking for something bluish, but it's red, yeah. So you can see it has 17 all-stat and 9 magic attack. A lot of times you can just check with your existing one if that's a significant enough upgrade to not push your current piece and to, like, abandon it. I would say in this case, that is pretty significant, 17 all-stat and 9 attack, and knowing that it's the best in slot, and then, you don't have to switch away from it. Secondaries, there is a lot of value in... This goes a little bit further into, like, just average cost and stuff, but once you get further into the game, tiering something up to legendary is actually really cheap. It's just a very small, necessary upgrade that you do. The expensive part is trying to get the exact potential that you want later on, right? And then, therefore, because secondaries can be, you can just get multiples of them. They're not like emblems where you just have one basic for most classes and then you're kind of stuck with them. This makes it so that you can roll another secondary on the side, maybe with cubes from bossing at that point, or with event cubes, or with just the regular glowing cubes that you can buy, so that you don't have to risk losing the potential of your existing without having to use the bright cubes, because that's a very expensive way of recubing your potential, just for that premium of being able to keep your potential before re-rolling, or the new one.
Got it. I think the shield is better, is what people are saying.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, sorry. I just so fucking tunnel visioned into just giving you the question to the answer to your literal question. Yeah, you want to go for the shield. Yeah. So typically the shield takes a while. You need to get a recipe, normal sickness, all of that stuff. So what most people do is they get some investment into their frozen leaf or whatever secondary you have for a little bit. And again, early on, it might seem like a huge waste of money to go for epic and to roll, or even go for unique and to roll. But again, just like with Sweetwater, you might need that extra damage from those pieces early on in order to be able to replace them. Now, you have a hyperburn, so you're going to level very quickly and get damage from a lot of other sources. So for this situation, you can probably skip that. If you're going to be investing any money, right now, from what I see from WSE, is try to get a better flame on the weapon. Right, try to get tier 5 plus or to tier 6, like it says here, for the magic attack on your wand, or not a wand, sorry, a memorial staff. There you go. And then your emblem that's going to stay with you for a long time. You can definitely, if you have any epic or unique potential scrolls or anything like that, you can throw that on here. This thing is going to stay with you for an extremely long time, and can give you attack percent, damage percent, crit rate, stat. Magic attack, IED, like a lot of very powerful stats on there. So these are going to be the quickest upgrades you can make. If with all that damage you can get to Princess No relatively quickly, you'll need 15 drops from Princess No to be able to make the princess leave. But like I said, it probably makes more sense to just roll like 6% magic attack here or so and directly go for the shield to kind of just like abandon the Princess No idea. Princess No's value is mostly going to be to get the ring. The Concentration Ring is just very, very powerful. Well, can be, right? Talked about this yesterday a lot, but basically a lot of pieces are kind of junk just by themselves. Clean base stats on this game are very, very low, very bad. It all comes down to how much you can upgrade something and the synergy with other pieces that determines whether or not an item has the potential, which is a dangerous word to use because potential is already something else, but like the potentiality of being something that can help your character and be something that's good enough to invest in the first place. So I don't know if you have I don't know if you have some pieces where you're like thinking, I don't know for sure if this item has the potentiality. That could be really hard to just gauge as someone who hasn't played in a while, or has only gotten up to a certain point of the game anyway. One of the big ways is just seeing the amount of stars, right? The gray stars on top. That's directly related to the level of the item. I believe 127 items can go up to, plus can go up to 20, I think. And then 137, level 137 plus items, I believe, can go up to 25. But yeah, any stars past 22 are pretty much impossible. 23 is kind of possible, I guess. But yeah, the percentage is basically 30% per success rate, right? Past, is it past 14? No, past 15. And then past 22, suddenly it's like 3%, then 2%, then 1%. So they clearly don't want you to go there. And also it loses stat on the Star Force and gains just attack, so the value per star goes down astronomically. Yeah, so WSE wise, that's what I would advise, like directly now for your money to go into. So like work towards shield, so that means normal Cygnus. Again, if you have drop rate, you have more chance of actually getting the recipe to drop. You need to make that with smithing, so you need to level up smithing a little bit, but that's very easy. Just any kind of diamonds or aquamarines you have, you can make projectiles, you can make arrows, and you can just brute force your level up. Even if you fail, you still get half the points, so you can turn those into leveling smithing very, very quickly. And then, yeah, you can craft that shield. Just make sure you have 100% chance to craft the shield when you do. It'll show the percentage chance before you actually craft it on the right side. In the little UI. I don't know if you've done any crafting.
I haven't, not yet.
Yeah. So for me, for example, like I have this recipe learned and I have level 10, but it says here success rate. Oh, it said 10% first, but it's changed to 100%. So make sure it says 100%, and then you just know that it's always going to work. You'll just need the materials. But if it has a recipe like this, that means the materials are kind of hidden, and you need a recipe unlocked to be able to see what the materials are. Of course, you can just Google, what it's going to be, but it's pretty low-level stuff. It's like two lithiums, and then some monster crystals, and then some items you could just buy from the NPC to throw it all together. I don't know if you can. It's under smithing. It's under sub weapon, shields. Yeah, it's gonna be something like this. So yeah, some things you see that even though I haven't unlocked them yet, I do know what the recipe is going to look like, so I know what to save for them.
Yeah.
Deimos shields. Yeah, so Deimos Sage Shield, that's the one you're going to be looking for, this recipe. And after that, I would just start building up the accessories. You're in a good position with this current burning gear as well. They never used to do this, where it just comes out of like full 12%, so that's 36% stat you're just getting for free. That's really, really nice. You could put some flames on here if you wanted to, but again, I would prioritize the stuff that's gonna stay with you longer first, and that also has a decently high level and the potentiality of getting good flame outcomes. So like a Pink Holy Cup, for example, it's level 140 with flame advantage. If you're still doing Pink Bean, you can get another flame, or another cup, sorry. And if you get a better flame, you can just switch them out, right? And just use your flames on whichever cup you're not equipping. Always just kind of like aim for these numbers, right? Just as soon as you get near these numbers, just know that it's going to be inefficient to try to go higher. So it's a good idea to start looking for a different target to flame instead. And just try to prioritize high-level items, try to prioritize items with flame advantage, and items that will stay with you for longer. So either, things that you've already invested into. It could even be like the earrings, or it could be, a Aquatic Letter Eye accessory, for example, like it's already epic. You're probably going to get it up to legendary to get drop or meso percentage on it, but it doesn't really have a flame. So once you're already invested in the potential and in the Star Force, now I would say it's also worth, if you have spare flames, to start throwing them on there. But if you don't have the potential, in this case, if you have Star Force on it, it's just 8, That's even at where you're at now, that's very easy to replace. Potential, that becomes harder and harder to replace, but if this was rare, and you just killed Zakum, or you killed Chaos Zakum, and it dropped something with a better flame, don't be afraid to just abandon this one and focus on the other one, right? Because then that saves you using a bunch of flames, and that might actually be worth a lot more than what it would cost you just to get a tier of potential on it. So as long as you're not locked in, try to keep your gaze wide and try to keep your options open, essentially. Okay.
And how... I know Star Force is impactful, but how big of a deal is it between, like... I've been trying to save a bit of money, not going all the way for 15 at the moment, but... Is it worth investing in it, or is that 5 stars and negligible?
So just up to 15, Star Forcing is pretty bad. It's really expensive, and it doesn't give you much. So just going to 15, so I kind of wanted to touch on that as well, because I see your pennant has 14 here. You probably wanted to push a little further, because you knew you were going to keep it for a long time because of the potential, I'm guessing. But if an item can only go up to 15, it's typically not worth to go to 15 unless you're drowning in cash. Because between like 11, maybe 12, up to 15, you're spending a lot of money for basically no gains. Because if you compare this to another item that's around the same point, like the Chaos Horntail necklace, and you look at the bonus stats, the Mechanitor Pendant gave an extra 12 all stat, and that's it. So, but that probably cost you tens of millions, maybe up to 100 mil or something if it fails a few times, right? Maybe you got lucky, and
I did get really lucky on that
yeah,
one.
that's usually what happens. But it is very possible for that to just cost you like 150 to 200 mil, or maybe even more. And then if you dial it back to like that being 12 all stat, that could be one flame on your aquatic letter eye accessory could give you 2 or 3 times that much. So when you're that early on, it's a good idea if you don't have an exact plan and knowing what you're doing with a piece. It's better to err on the side of caution of just holding on to your money and maybe just asking someone, or looking at like what, or right now what you could do, right? You can click on people and kind of see like what are other people wearing, you know, what decisions do people make with their gear? You know, why is this Will-O-the-Wisp, for example, why is it has drop rate gear, it's part of the boss accessory set. Why does it have 16 stars? You know, well, it probably didn't have any backups, but there was just a 5, 10, 15, so he probably wanted to get a little bit more damage from it because he's a Nightwalker. Nightwalker deals damage through the bats. Bats have less damage because they can fly around and they can poke things, but because of that, you can lose some quantity kill speed because they use those particle effects. So you do want your drop rate gear probably to be a little bit stronger to be able to maintain your kill speed. And that's probably why during the 5, 10, 15, you probably tapped it to 16 because it was risk-free and no boom. And you could still, and then, right, what I was just talking about, because this can get past 15, this is a decently good investment to get into because now you can see that extra weapon attack coming in. And I don't know how much you know about like stat equivalency, but in general, you can see one weapon attack, roughly it's like 3 stat. So instead of this having, you know, like the pendant here plus 40, it has plus 47 plus 7. So now it's just not 7 more, it's 7 more and 21 more, so now it's 28 more, which is quite a lot more. And now every star past 16 gives even more. So to compare it to my character, you know, why do you... is Star Force worth it? You can have pieces that are, let's see, do I have anything that's like... This one is 15, right? So it's just plus 40 all. This one is plus 17, so now it's plus 62 all, and then 19 attack. 19 doesn't look like a big number, but again, you kind of... mentally you have to multiply it by 3, so that's like 57. So 57 plus the 62, that's 119 versus 40, that's 3 times as much. So that's because of the level difference and because of the 2 extra stars. This thing is 19 as a level 160 piece. This is plus 92 stat and plus 46 attack. That blows this one out of the water by a lot, right?
Yeah.
These things are 21, so now you see plus 106 stat and plus 69 attack. Nice. So all of your items kind of become just like mini weapons, and your actual weapon isn't the one that has to pull all the weight in terms of weapon attack, but all these other pieces start taking into account a little bit of it. See, these aren't that high. These are 25, 25, 32, but then 69, 69. This is 25, 19, 29, 63, 19, 17, like just all of that compounded together, right? And that's also why you look in the progression and you look here at the total attack power, weapon attack. It starts pretty low, but it makes a huge jump here, and then another big jump here is because here you're basically barely working on like 17 star stuff. Here you're working on like 19 and 21 star stuff, and here you're like 22ing everything. And the total amount of attack that you're getting, together with the attack percent lines on your WSE, that working together is a huge benefit to your damage. And again, that doesn't show in your stat. That doesn't necessarily... It shows in your combat power, but you can't really pull out of your combat power like, oh, that's exactly because of this much weapon attack, right? That's a hard number to pull out of there. So that's why it's good to kind of look at all of these metrics and just see if you're ever behind, really behind on one of these metrics. That just means that disproportionately spending a bit more effort into trying to get that number up is probably where you're going to have the most efficient gains. And that's why when you see the stat, you don't want to just aim for the stat with your potential, but you also want to make sure that your attack power is tracking. Because if this is right where you want it to be, but this is like half, that means that you're over on potentials and under on Star Force. That's what that means. That's why I have Star Force as a level, as a number as well, so you can have like a general number to aim for. Yours is going to be a little bit higher because of your shield. Other classes cannot get Star Force from their secondary, but you will, so your Star Force would be a little bit higher. And also, your passive from the guild is included in this, because always when you look at your stat window, it's going to look higher from the passive once you join a guild. So now you're probably way below that number, right? That's perfectly normal. but like guild passives will, there's some damage in the passives, and one of them is Star Force. It doesn't give you damage to Star Force, but it has to do with Star Force areas, so you don't get the big shields and the damage reduction there, and the bonus incoming damage.
Got it. That makes much more sense now compared to before, because I always thought it's like, oh, I'm at such an early part of the game, is it worth it to try and push that high on specific pieces of gear?
Yeah.
Versus just letting them sit at 10, 11, 12 without investing
10, 11,
in a
12
ton
is,
of money.
yeah, 10, 11, 12 is great. Yeah. I would say investing early on into like however far it goes, like 8, 10, is fantastic because that's just super cheap. And then you sit there for quite a while, and then you're basically only working on potentials, WSE, accessories, once you know you're locked into your character. And then you just work on backups. You slowly work on flames, mostly the weapon, CRA when you get it, Abso when you get it, work into the Abso, slowly work on the potentials. And then you basically just wait, because you're waiting for the Star Force events, right? You're waiting for the 30% off event, get it up to 15. And then you're waiting for the 5, 10, 15 event, get it from 15 to 17. And then, then basically you're just working more on backups. That's when, even the mistake can kind of slip in of like going too hard on potential then because you're just waiting. Then it's a really good idea to just get even more backups and then start working on like 19 star stuff, CRA first, 21 star stuff maybe, just as you have backups, kind of treasure rings. You're going to be working anyway on getting into Superior Golics. That's going to be expensive. That's going to take a while. You want to have the money for it when you get that. You're going to be slowly even start working towards Arcanes at that point. You want to have the money when those pieces come around. So it's best to not go too hard on potentials, because they're either going to be items that you're going to transfer hammer into other things or get transfer hammered into, or you're going to be moving away from. So really the only potentials that you would want to work on, you've already done that, because that's the emblem, that's the secondary, and that's your drop in Mesogear. That's going to be your foundation of your account. And like I said before, it's like Arcane Power, Fee Matrix, WSE potential, and then your Legion, your whole account. That's what's going to carry your damage for most characters, because that's just how much damage characters actually have access to. And that's going to be good enough. And yeah, the sooner you kind of like go unique on accessories and stay there and kind of like lock into that damage, you start becoming reliant on that damage, and then it becomes harder to get rid of it into Legendary to get the drop in the Meso. So it's a good idea to just do that right after the WSE is good, so you don't get stuck in that situation for too much, because it'll just feel bad to go down in damage again. You basically want to go from 6 or 9% Epic to 6 or 9% on Legendary, but then with drop or Meso. That's the ideal, so that you don't lose any damage. You just keep equal damage, essentially.
And what are the new cubes that can get you to Legendary? They changed since I...
Yeah, the glowing cubes, the purplish ones, those are just the old... wait, glowing is purple? No, glowing is bluish, right? Just, am I mixing them up now? I thought I had them.
They're definitely color.
Definitely color. No, the way I remember it is like bright starts with a B. That's like the old black cubes. So those do the same. They have the same cost, same functions, same rank, rate up, all of it. The only small thing they changed is that the new cubes have a very small chance of double tiering up. It's exceptionally rare though. But other than that, they're the same as far as we can tell.
I got it. I've gotten like a couple just from drops and events. It's the green ones and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the greens are the solids. Those are the no, the greens are not solid. Greens are hard. The names are still, see, I'm still working on it too. The hard cubes, those are the old Meister cubes that were like grayish with gold on it.
Yeah.
And then the old Meisters were purple, and then the new purplish ones are the solid ones. Those are, again, same function, same lines, all of that.
And does it end up being worth it saving up like that 2.4 bill to get all the glowing cubes, or earlier on do just the epic cubes suffice?
Well, they're just a 1-to-1. Like, there's no discount. So I would just buy smaller packs as you need them, so that you're not left with like a whole bunch of capital just sitting in terms of items or pushing you towards certain things. People will like Yeah, people like the bright cubes a lot to get the tier ups, and then the glowing cubes once you get to legendary to roll. Because then you have like power in numbers, right? Because they're these are 22 mil each, and these are 12 mil each. Bright cubes is for essentially for tiering up and for re-rolling if you're trying to get 2 lines of prime lines. So you can try to get drop and a meso together, or you can try 2 lines of critical damage on gloves, or that kind of stuff. So that's for much later for the actual rolling. So most people use the bright cubes just for the tier ups, and then the glowing for the rolling. From what we know from the maths, it should be basically similar which ones you use. It just feels worse using the glowing because they're cheaper, so you have to roll more times. But per money, they should end up costing about the same. So if you look at cubing, we have tier up costs. It's like the old number, so it just still uses red and black cubes, but you can see the difference in a whole bunch of samples that people took, and then looking at the average costs. So for getting to epic, it's not advised to use any of the big cubes, and like the ones that master, so the hard cubes are better on average per cost. They're the ones you get from bosses. I usually use those as well to get from rare to epic. And then once they're epic, you can see the difference, like 202.5, 204, 198. Like, yeah, technically it's cheaper according to the sample size, but I feel like these are just rounding errors, Like, this is extremely close together. And when you look at unique to legendary, 492 or 484 on average, like, that's also extremely close together. So you can see the difference here on average. On average, black cubes are a little bit more expensive even than the red, but you pay a little bit more money with the with the glowing cubes in terms of reveal cost, and you just have to click more, which people can see as more, as worse, just because it's a quantity thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you don't have any specific questions, I did want to go over the screenshots just really quickly, just to see if anything popped out specifically. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
I was gonna say, this is kind of like a whatever you see, whatever you think could be better kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, the progression grid, so I'm going to keep that in the back of my head a little bit as like the numbers that we're looking for, right? The ID here is definitely not super high here. Why is it 100% here? What happened? Using a special item?
One's buffed, one's unbuffed.
But you go up to 100%? That typically means you have to have one individual source that has 100%. Is there a 100% Lynn ID buff, chat? Wait, Lynn uses Demo Shield? Yeah. It's like the old Beast Tamer. Beast Tamer used to use Shield. They kept that the same because they didn't want people to have to remake their secondaries because it's very expensive. It's probably like temporary buff, right? Not 100% uptime?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you ever have 100%, that means one of your sources has to be 100% by itself. And then that also means that all the other sources are useless. If you know how ID works, basically ID, whatever source of ID you add, it takes the percentage of that source as the amount that you're missing to get from where you are to 100%. So let's say you have 80%, you add a source of 10%, then you have 10% of the missing 20% between 80 and 100. So that's 2%. So you go from 80 to 82. So you never, it's like getting half closer to someone, right? You always take half of less, so you never actually get to where the person is. But 100% means you are where the boss is. So something must have done 100% of whatever distance was left. So that thing in itself does the whole thing. So when I see this number, I'm like, I need the context, because otherwise this means we can get rid of all the ID and this whole character, right? And then we can just purely pump damage. So it's good to know that that's not the case, right? But that for a certain amount of time, you will be dealing full damage, or true damage, as we call it. But then for the off time, when that is off, the 70% is still definitely something to be working on. Early on, getting a line of IED, or maybe even two, on something like a weapon, secondary, or emblem is good. Is really good to make sure that your bossing damage stays high. And then usually it's either once you get ID familiars, once you get ID from Golix set, or once your Legion is so big that you can start filling in the IED in the Legion grid, that's usually the point where you start rolling away from that IED from the WSE and start pinpointing more, or start, focusing more towards boss damage or magic attack, whatever the balance is that your account needs, essentially.
Yeah, I did actually just find where that buff came from.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever's giving me the 100%. It's coming from something. I don't know how to recreate this. Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, that's again, that's why it's an important thing to just also read all your skills, just to know what they do. Just to see, because is this skill like 10% uptime or is this skill like 50% uptime? That changes quite a bit in terms of how do I need to see my required stats for my character. Right? Crit rate is a big one, because sometimes your crit rate, this one looks at 128%. What to me that says, okay, so if in the hyperstats you have a lot of crit rate, you can probably lower that down already. Or if you have a big link skill that gives you crit rate, maybe you take that one out and replace it with one that does damage. But you're pretty early in the game, so you probably have limited link skills, so it's better to keep the link skills in and work on the hyperstats instead, because that's where you're still that's where you have more flexibility right now. So that's kind of like how you want to look at these stats. But some classes, like a Buccaneer, for example, it can look like 40% crit rate in the stat window, but when you're attacking a boss, you'll have 100%, just because of how the kit works. So you just have to really read and just make sure that you understand what your skills are, what they do, so that you can know what your character needs in terms of, icing on the cake to make sure that it tops it off and you compensate for the shortcomings that the class has.
Yeah, and speaking of the IED buff for the Lynn, I just realized that I've missed that 30% ID buff on my bar the entire time.
Oh, see, there you go. That's also a good thing to learn. Put it on a key somewhere, right? Put it on a hotkey. Make sure it shows up. It happens with skills that have 100% uptime and or they don't have 100% uptime, but they have no cooldown. You kind of just, when you read them, you kind of assume that they're just a passive, but sometimes you just have to cast them, every 3 minutes, and you can permanently cast them, so it's a good idea to put them in a macro, or to make sure that they're clustered together with some other stuff that you can't forget. It's easier to see 3 buffs missing than 1 buff missing often, so. So
I did find what gives me just straight up 100%, regardless. I did just send it in Discord. It's Defense Smash. I don't know where that's coming from.
Oh, that might be a special node?
Oh, yeah, that's probably what that boss node is. Yeah, there it is.
So when you use a skill for a few seconds, you'll have this thing activate. Yeah.
Yeah, for 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's, I guess, where it's coming from, because I used...
Yeah, no, I see it here in your V matrix, and when it activates, you'll see a big V open up, appear over your character. That means that a special node is activated.
Got it. That makes much more sense.
Yeah, because otherwise, if this was your stat window, we'd be looking at a completely different, priority for everything. So it's good to just, look at things and try to figure them out. Yeah. So for hyperstats, you have 3 presets. It's usually a good idea to have one for mobbing, one for bossing. In the beginning, you kind of make a hybrid one, but very quickly, with how quickly you level, especially when you're a hyper burn, it's a good idea to make 2 separate ones, one for mobbing, one for bossing. And in the third one, you can technically make 4 characters that require more, for bosses, that require more arcane power, so you can get more bonus damage earlier on. So that's specifically once you get to Will, once you get to Vihila, once you get to Black Mage. Those typically, you can get access to them way before you have the required amount of arcane power, and just building more arcane power actually give you more total damage than going directly into stats, which seems a little counterintuitive. I have a specific video for this, for hyperstats, so I'll definitely I'll link you that one so you can check it out. A lot of it goes a little bit more fundamentally into first and that's where damage comes from and sources of damage that you have. But what it basically comes down to is for your character specifically, critical rate is very high priority, but I talk about priority in terms of you have to look at the stat first, but looking at it means checking, are you hitting the benchmarks, right? Are you hitting, critical rate is very high priority, are you hitting this number? If you're hitting that number, you can move to the next one. Priority doesn't mean you have to max it out first, it only means you have to consider it first. So, for your character, critical rate, for every character, critical rate is one of the highest, one of the top number 1, right, to consider. But you already have 100% even without this. So you can leave it at 0. And then you can move on to the next one. Critical damage, considering that you have high critical rate, is high priority. and with the amount of points you have, it'll probably get it to level 10. So this one could be the bossing setup, right? Because you have ignore defense. Remember, ignore defense really doesn't do much at all when you're mobbing, so it's exclusively a bossing one. But if you're bossing in this setup, you'd also want damage and boss damage. So these, you'll never see ignore defense on 10, and then damage and boss damage on 0. What you could see is like all of them on 7, all of them on 8, or maybe ID on 10 and the other ones on 7 or 8. That's possible if your character has low IED. And if you have high IED, you might see damage and boss damage on 10, and then IED only on 7 or 8. Eventually, once you get to higher level, once you get past 250, you typically get all of them to 10, just because of how cheap it is to get to 10 compared to going past 10 is really, really expensive. So it makes more sense to kind of like evenly distribute them between the stats that are relevant for you. So if it's a bossing setup and you have the crit rate that you do, you typically would evenly distribute between crit damage, ID, boss, and damage, provided that that gets you to the numbers, right? So ID-wise, you're still pretty far off. So the ID would probably be a little bit higher. Prioritize that to 10. And then probably all the other ones could be level 8 or 9 or something. And then you just slowly work those up for your bossing setup. For your mobbing setup, it's very similar, but you basically just replace the boss damage with normal damage instead. And it basically just takes the same position. And then you can replace IED with, if you scroll down on the bottom, you have EXP obtained, right? Those are basically just exchanged, and that's it. You can put points into attack power, magic attack, or even into intellect, but that is something that I usually do if I know I'm not going to be leveling for a while and I have some points left over, not enough to get a level in the big ones, but I do want to use them for something functional, and like I said, I'm not going to be leveling for a while, so I'm not going to be able to afford another level for a bit. Then I put them into attack power, into intellect, roughly equally, just to get some more juice out of them. But remember, if you put some points into there a little bit too early, it might actually take away from a level of the bigger ones, because it can be hard to see how many points exactly are in a level 7 skill. And it could be enough with the points left over to actually get a level here, which would affect your damage more. So it might be a good idea to redo those. And I sent you the link as well to the video, so hopefully that, if you have follow-up questions, let me know, jump around in chat, just shout out. But that should clear all up for hyperstats. And again, this is one of those things, kind of annoying, it's kind of min-maxy, you have to do like maths and stuff, but this makes it so that if you have that properly set up and you understand that you just don't have to work as hard on things dying, and you can focus more on your mechanics and on feeling the game progressing and working for you.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Interoperability is tricky early on. Very similar to what we're talking about, like the quantity and the quality thing. Most classes do not need a lot of damage from their interoperability and can really focus on trying to get drop rate and mesoptane from that very early on. The characters who will need damage from their interoperability are any classes who need attack speed as their main thing. Usually that makes the character just more fluid and better playable, better survivability, all of that. And characters who need buff duration in there. If you are not one of those two, then go for drop and meso as quickly as you can, just to speed up, all of the little sources together add up, and that'll just help you progress through the game faster. Don't use too much honor. In the beginning, you get quite a lot of honor, and it feels like it's a very easy resource to get. But aside from event shops, and aside from like the first 300k or so honor you get, it's actually really hard to get more. So don't invest your first honor too quickly. And you can use circulators as well. It's a bit expensive early on, of course. They're like 18 mil each. But all circulators are, keep the next roll or keep the original one. You can always pick. But I always set a budget for, circulators. Don't be like, oh, I'm just going to roll until I hit a really good line or something. The reason circulators are good is because you can basically buy honor rolls for meso, right? So that's nice. And also, if any kind of number you see in a circulator is always going to be the highest possible number, because there's variance within the numbers. You see you have the 19% boss damage. Legendary boss lines could be 18, 19, or I think even 17. But, I'd have to look at the resources. I don't know everything by heart. I believe 17, 18, 19, or 20. And every roll within that has its own percentage of prevalence again. But if you were to roll boss damage legendary on a circulator, it'll always be 20. So because the best possible unique lines are really close for some classes, for most classes, to the legendary line. We want to use the circulators first to get a really good unique line, and then lock that in, and then use the honor with that locked in line to roll for the top line. Because the top line actually has less variance than the bottom line, and because then we'll basically have like 2 really good lines that just, you know, makes sense optimally. You're not at that point yet, because that's a pretty big expense. You probably want to have like 1.5, 2 mil honor before you start doing that shit. So you're more in a sense now where I would look towards probably wait for a 50% off event, or until you have enough money left after you got the drop of the Meso gear done, to look for drop rate Meso obtain in your inner-ability. Again, provided that you don't need buff duration or attack speed, which I not 100% sure actually, because it may have changed. Lynn. Attack speed and buff duration. So, what do we do instead? We make 2 inner abilities. Haha. Because we can have multiple.
Get a second legendary one.
Yeah, you have a second legendary one? Cool. So, you can, if there's 50% off, freely reroll. If you're still in the beginning and you need 2 of them, that's really cool, because it's basically like you have 2 items and you need one for boss and one for drop, but you haven't predetermined which one is which. So now you have way more outs. You have way more options of hitting something that's useful. So you can be in a very good position. As soon as something hits something really cool, then you can lock that one in for the training one or for the bossing one, and then the other one will get the remaining function. Right now, of course, 19 boss damage is really nice, but that isn't nice enough to completely lock in what the purpose of that inner ability is going to be. Just to have that be clear. Okay, hyper skills. Yeah, for that, I mean, everything I'm just going to open the commands, because I don't know any of these things by heart. So I made those at some point, and I also check, like, well, I should probably check class discords more, but class discords aren't really happy with people just like yoinking their content, so I tend to not do that. I do mention it when I.
Are you surprised if I'm completely off on this one?
Lynn. So we have reinforce and extra strike. So critical rate. Did you get that one? Usually, yeah. So usually critical rate on individual skills we typically never get, because you want to build your critical rate in your stat window to just have 100% crit on everything, and then once you have that, individual crit rate for things just doesn't do anything anymore. It's just like a wasted point. And in a kind of a similar way, ID for individual skills works the same way. If the ID for a skill gives you just more ID passively, then it's really, really good. But if it just gives more ID for an individual skill, again, that just means that that particular skill is going to hit a little bit higher. That can be good very early on when you still have a beginning account that is just lacking those fundamental stats. But once you have those fundamental stats, those points are essentially going to be wasted, and they'd be more useful in boosting just a flat-out attack, just to hit harder. Because we want to know for sure that you have that functional IED built out for everything. And then when you do, these things also get diminishing returns because you already have more IED, right? So there's only a smaller part of IED to take a percentage of. So again, if you're a completely new account, but because you're a Lynn, your crit rate is already super high. So this crit rate one and this crit rate one are actually kind of almost immediately useless. But the ID could be useless if you have a very new account, right? Because like I said, no Golic set, no IED familiars, no big Legion. IED will be struggling early on, and if you have no lines of IED on WSE, you will be low on IED. So these kind of have value early on. But you can also just very quickly just click reset them, and that's very simple. So once you do have the IED, and it says so here as well, right? Once you do have the IED, then it basically... You're in an easy position because there's 1, 2 IED ones and 2 crit rate ones. You take those away, there's 5 left. You just level the 5 remaining ones. So you don't have to do any advanced arithmetic or something for this character. That's pretty simple. A lot of other classes, it's not as simple, and you have a lot more options. So you might have to look at class discords. You might have to look at... or sometimes they change, you know. Sometimes early on, you want to go for more survivability. Then once you get stronger and you know the bosses better, you might want to go for more damage. And then once you go to even harder bosses where your damage is not the problem anymore, it's survivability, you maybe want to switch back again, right? Certain stages of the game might have different demands for your hyper skills. Right now, sadly, the hyper skills are not part of the character presets. but I wished it would be at some point, because some characters also switch between mobbing and bossing, for example, because they have too many good ones, more than 5. So they need to switch over every time, which is a burden, as you can imagine, having to do that manually. The Matrix is coming along nicely. Did you find your? You just have 2 sets of your boost nodes, right? Just basically boosting everything.
Yeah, I've been putting stuff in the wrong place. I learned it's strike, sneak attack, and predator's blows for 1, and then it's earth pulverization, beak strike, and then whatever.
Yeah,
that's last one.
It's not as important because you have more than enough spot. Like as you keep leveling, you'll have more than enough space. So you can like mix and match them together. Just make sure that every skill is on there twice and only twice. And as long as you have that you can have all of the skills twice each on 4 total nodes. And then as long as the nodes eventually level up to 25 and they get to put in a level 5 slot, eventually it'll all go to 60, which is the max to boost them.
I was mainly prioritizing strike and then what is it, pulverizing earth, I think. Mainly because they're my main ones I use for mobbing. I wasn't really thinking bossing in that case. It was mainly all mobbing.
I get that. So there is a lot of value in node shards, if specifically for Lynn, because all of your boost nodes can be useful boost nodes. Once you've locked into the 4, there's only 2 boost node outcomes that aren't useful, and then all of your skill nodes are useful, and then usually the special ones you can extract for shards. But the thing with node shards is you can craft specifically nodes, but you can also craft node stones with them. Have you done that at all?
I have not. I may have made or crafted like 1 or 2, but not
so generally. Yeah. So in the beginning, if your damage comes from a lot of different things, the best value you can get for nodes early on is if you just craft more stones with them and then just reveal those and then extract again what you don't need and then craft more stones with them, and then you can kind of like recycle the value over and over. So if you go to node crafting, there's a craft node stone button up here, and they only cost 35 shards each. So that's half of what a boost node would cost and a quarter of what a skill node would cost. So this just allows you to get way more opens and just get your levels. Again, this is one of those things like building your Legion where you're not going to get to the specific skills max the fastest, but you're going to get to your total V-Matrix being maxed in way fewer total resources. Does that make sense?
And you said only get 2 per skill and then share with another one, I guess?
Yeah, so every boost node can be leveled up to 25, and it can be put in a level 5 slot. So that will 25 plus 5 up to 30 max. And then, but the total levels that you can boost a skill in boost nodes is up to 60. So that's exactly 30 times 2. So if you have it in more, you can do that early on to push it closer to 60 faster. But then as the nodes level up past that point, you'll want to move them. You'll want to like remake the nodes essentially and just use the nodes as fusion nodes into other ones to make sure that you change the composition of which skills are in the node. So to try to get to that point where you have exactly 2 of each, yeah.
Okay.
So with that, there's the point of leveling up the slots and placing the nodes, right? I see you have the levels a little bit like divided over the slots and a little bit all over the place. I think it's a good idea to just max out one slot and then move on to the next one. Which ones you pick doesn't really matter. I mean, you can see it by the gold color which one is leveled. But on top of just leveling one slot at a time, and you, at least in these pictures here, you have 6 matrix points left, so I don't know if you've used those yet.
I think I have 9 now.
Yeah, if you have 9, that's basically 9 levels of your nodes that you're getting for free, but that you haven't assigned. And the higher your levels get, the more expensive those levels get. So because node stones are already so rare, it's very important to use the matrix points, because then that's basically taking weight off of the necessity for more nodes. It's basically like getting nodes, but just in a different way. So when it comes to priority of like which skills to put in leveled up nodes, it's just the ones that give you a better effect when they're higher level, right? So if you are a very heavy DPM character, which you are, you have more stable over time damage and not like a significant burst, then typically your boost nodes or skill nodes with very low cooldown are the ones that will affect your damage to the like the highest percentage. And then secondary will just be skill nodes in general that are more bursty. And then lastly will be more general skill nodes. And then at the very bottom will be the decent skills. Now, if I look at your setup, you have 3 of the leveled up slots have those decent skills in them. The decent skills already have 100% uptime, even at level 1. And their effect barely goes up as they level. So what I'd rather have you do is put the boost nodes into the leveled up slots instead, because that would be 5 levels, which is 10% final damage, well, final damage points, right, additively, with their existing buff on those skills, rather than just like 5 seconds more duration of a skill that already has 100% uptime. On top of that, on top of that, decent advanced blessing is also, I would say, lower priority, so I would take that one out altogether, and instead use... there are other skills you can use that will be more effective for you. Probably your 4th boost node, right? To try to find that combination of the boost nodes that will help you. Also, as a mage, I don't think you have it yet, but once you get Mana Overload, you want to use that. That gives you final damage across the board. It just makes all your skills cost more mana, so you have to use a bit more potions. But it's very nice to just get that flat final damage over. But yeah, so I would prioritize your boost nodes. And the one decent skill that you do want to level is Decent Holy Symbol, because Decent Holy Symbol will give you more EXP per level and more drop rate. And EXP and drop rate, that's what we want, right? But the other ones, the other decent skills, as long as you have one, you could basically extract the rest. One extra tip, I would right-click the nodes that you want to keep and click the lock function. That way, if you open up a bunch of nodes, you can just do disassemble all, and all the ones that aren't locked will then just all get disassembled at the same time, and it'll save you a lot of clicking. And that way you don't accidentally disassemble things that you might use.
That makes more sense.
So there's a few you can always get rid of. Decent Hyper Body you can always get rid of. Decent Mystic Door you can always get rid of. And there's a few other ones that are low priority to level, so I would say decent Sharp Eyes, decent Combat Orders, decent Advanced Blessing. You just have one of those, and then all the rest, for now, you can get rid of, just to get more shards early on, craft more node stones, level up your stuff that's more important more quickly, right? Oh, and decent Speed Infusion with that second batch as well. Yeah. And all of this just so you can get your resources specifically into crafting more node stones and getting your matrix built out faster. The Urda skills, so we're talking about Blink, Shower, Rope Lift, Nova, and Urda's Will. All of those I would keep and level as you get them, but you're probably not going to craft any of them like specifically until way later. So you could just slowly, passively level those up. Basically all those bluish Urda skills that you get. Put those in one group. And then, yeah, the special skills, the purple ones you get, most of them are probably not going to be that useful. You could just extract them, or you can just disassemble them. They give a good amount of shards, so they're nice catches in the way that they just give you another node stone and some back whenever you open them. But most of them are not useful for you at all. Later on in bossing, there's like a healing one, but you're already a healing machine, so I doubt that that's going to be very useful for you. There's like Fatal Strikes, which can give you more damage in certain boss situations. And there's a few that can give a little bit more EXP, but they have a very tough activation procedure to even be useful. So in general, for most special nodes, it's very min-maxy, very late game heavy stuff. You can basically just get rid of most of those immediately, or all of them, I would say. So yeah, some work to do here, but again, optimizing this, optimizing hyperstats, putting all that together, you're probably already gonna notice, if not the numbers of your damage getting bigger and everything, but just your character just being more solid and just being able to put out more damage just by rearranging all of this a little bit. Did you have any specific questions?
Not really.
Okay. We looked at your arcane power. You know how to do that. You're working on your legion. That's good. Yeah, so get those 120s, level 2 link, 140s. And 140s also, I did forget to mention that 140 is a good spot because, you know, you unlock the level 2 link and the rank S for the legion board and your pieces get bigger. But also, if you... Up to 42 characters, their level counts for the Legion, right? And if you get up to 42 that are level 140, and then you always have a few characters level higher because of burn and events, rewards, and that kind of stuff. Then you can basically get to 6K, and 6K is a really big milestone because then you get the whole grid available. So you'll get all the way into the corners, and you can put pieces everywhere. So then you can like max out IED and critical damage, for example, and that's like huge damage increase for a bossing setup. One thing you can do if you're having trouble building the grid, because now it's like a little bit of a, it's an interesting shape. Let's leave it at that. You can, I don't know if you know, you can press the little arrows and you can shift around where the stats are.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, if you're switching to a mob or to a different character that has different main stats, you can switch it to like weapon attack and main stat. Yeah. Okay. Just clarifying that. Legion artifact is that's also just all starting up, right? That's also those passives. I see you've worked on those stats a little bit. That'll be a very small amount now, but it will end up working up to a great thing. Same thing, very similar with the Legion artifact, similar to like boost nodes, is that you can level up to level 10, and every single artifact can go up to level 5. So you will end up with every stat being in 2 different artifacts to make sure that it eventually gets maxed out.
Got it.
They like that pattern a lot, so they like to do that. That'll come back in like Hexa. Once you get there, there's the Hexa stat that you can roll as well, where it's also like, oh, you need it on 2 to max, but on the top line it's double that of the bottom line, so you need it in the top line once and in the bottom line twice to max it out. Like they like doing that kind of pattern for things. And like I said, link skills, you're just slamming everything in there that you have now. That's totally reasonable. Those slowly will go up to level 2. Those slowly increase in number. And then as they increase in number, like you were talking about, like min-maxing your Legion, your link skill setup for mobbing or bossing. The cool thing about that is if you start, so this screen just started as just putting all the link skills and all the Legion in one grid. But if you're starting with bossing and you want to know which link skills to use, you can just start from the left and be like, crit rate. Okay, do I need crit rate? I don't? Cool. Next one. Do I need critical damage? Yes. Okay, I have 1 critical damage link skill. I'm going to put that one in. Cool. Damage while mobbing? I'm bossing, so I don't need that. Damage to all monsters? Ooh, I might need that. Let's see. Are these conditional, and are these going to be possible during the boss fight, or no? Arc, Kana, Demon Avenger, these are going to be useful. Kali, that's a small percentage. Maybe I skip that one. I can always come back. EXP, I don't care. It's bossing. Meso Obtain, nope. Buff duration, is my character disproportionately affected by buff duration? Not as much, but hey, look at that. It's a Legion thing. It's not a link skill thing, so I don't even have to worry about it, right? No white box. Okay, immunity. Do I need more survivability? Do I need the shade? When you're still practicing, you need a bit more survivability. You can definitely take that. Once you feel more comfortable, you probably move away from that. So that's a possibility. These stack together into one slot, gives you up to 8 seconds of invulnerability once you respawn every time you die. I think that's very useful, almost standard for bossing all the way throughout. Once you get to the point where you have some kind of damage that you're missing out on that's significant. I think that's a really good one. IED, again, and then you look at progression, right? Am I at the number of functional IED where I want to be? No, I'm still on the low end. Then you probably want to... this one. Then I probably want to push as much IED as I possibly can. All the ones I have available, slam them all in there, right? Get as much IED as possible. Is there any spots left? Damage while bossing. Look at all these white boxes. Abnormal status resistance. Not that important. Healing. Again, that's extra survivability. Not as important. And then you get to the red and, So as long as you know the function of what you're doing and you know which boss you're going to be doing, you can use this grid as well, just as a priority, left to right, of like which link skills do I select for my situation that I'm building on. And as you build those presets, right, you can also link those to the character preset and be like, okay, my first preset for my for my link skill is when I'm mobbing. The second one is when I'm bossing, and then the third one is when I'm doing the hard bosses and I want to have the most survivability possible. So I'm purely going on, status resistance, healing, revivability, and then a little bit of ID and boss. That's like the boss damage, I should say. That's like, that could be your third setup, for example. And as long as you have those linked with the presets, with a simple click and preset, boom, you can have all of that set up immediately.
Got it.
early on it's going to be more work for you to set up, but if you've
Yeah.
already been playing for a few years and you can finally use those presets, it's a godsend. Having to switch like 9 pieces every single time you open up a box on every single boss mule is yeah, no, that's needless to say, that's fucking horrible. So it's a great shift. Yeah, it's a great change. And as your setup, changes, it just changes the whole setup with it, so you don't need to manually do that every time. That's also pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions remaining after that huge yap session that I just unleashed on you?
I could literally just never learn anything again.
Well, there's
It's a good
plenty
thing
to
I'm
learn.
not in
Well,
school.
yeah. Once you get to the hexa matrix and everything, it all gets even more complicated compared to like what the V matrix is now. But a lot of that has to do with you have your boost nodes, which just boosts your current 5th job skills in the same way that your current boost nodes in the V matrix boost your 4th job and lower skills. That's very similar.
Yeah.
You unlock one big origin skill, which is a huge bind, and generally a long iframe. That's also pretty straightforward. And then the mastery cores, as they unlock, basically empower, and just not just strengthen, but also give more effects, bigger, different hitboxes, that kind of stuff, to existing 4th job and below that are boosted within the V matrix, essentially. So to unlock that one, you'll need the skills in the V matrix, the boost nodes, to be at least level 40, not including the level of the slot itself. So it has to, if you look in the V tab in the skill, so it has to, basically you have to subtract the number that's in brackets to know what the level is. So like Octopunch here is 60, it has the +10, so it's technically level 50, so that's high enough. That has to be at least level 40 to be able to unlock the mastery core. And for the boost node, I believe your skill node has to be completely maxed, so level 25. So because of how quickly you level and because of still how difficult it is to get node stones, you probably won't be able to level up or unlock the boost nodes for quite a bit, and you're mostly going to be using the origin and working towards getting your mastery core as soon as possible, and then just saving up resources. But yeah, that's for now, that's what the hexa matrix is, but it's still being built out. There's still more. There's a second mastery core is coming out later in the summer, in about a month, and other stuff is coming out, very, very slowly. So they're careful not to give like huge power creep. Like the initial was already like just your origin and just your mastery core. For you, it might be even a higher percentage because of how little your account is built. But for people with built accounts, just those two was roughly like 40% total damage just increased through their character.
Jeez.
So it's again a huge jump, and yeah, a whole new layer of funding to your account for sure.
Damn.
All right.
Lots
of information for you to think about. I think right now it's I would definitely look at the hyper stats, and I'd look at the hyper passives, and then look at your V matrix to make sure that that's all set up like we talked about, and that should already give you right now quite a nice boost in damage. And then I would look at flames on the weapon, and maybe check out the flame video, right, just to make sure you got all of that straight. If you have any questions, ask me before you start throwing flames at, not after, preferably, or do what you want, but those resources are limited. And then I would work potential on the emblem and work towards the shield, and then get the drop rate and meso gear, start working on that, basically throw all your resources at that, and then basically just try to have as much fun as possible. Try to do the content you like, and if it's something you don't like, try to use events and everything to shortcut it as much as possible.
Got it.
All right. Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks for everything.
You're very welcome. I'll see you around in chat, and or I'll see you in the next one.
Sounds good.
Later. Later. Bye-bye. Alrighty. It was a great call, Discord. Thank you for asking. Okay. Wow. So maybe some similarities that you guys saw with the session from yesterday. In some senses, also someone coming back and having some fundamental things that can be confusing, but also different in a lot of ways. So hopefully it was useful to you guys. We got to use a lot more of the commands today, right? Thankfully for me, there's actually some connection to these things, and they actually kind of still work, so that's good. So yeah, if you have any questions or if you like to use these commands, come over to twitch.tv/Scardor. You can use these commands in the chat, even when I'm offline all the time, available to everyone. If you have any notes, any questions, any you think something is wrong, something is outdated, or you need extra explanation on something, I'm here to help. If you can't reach out or I'm not live on Twitch, you can always reach out through YouTube, through Discord, through Twitter or X or whatever you call it these days. I've reached out for the free sessions for this month already. Every month I also make a post where people who are on YouTube can leave their Discord name, and I will draw 2 winners to give them a free session like this one as well. If you don't want to wait that long, you can also check !coaching in the chat, or you check the description of the video on how you can contact me and how you can get one of these coaching sessions with me if you think it will be useful for you. Other than that, check out one of the other videos if you want. If not, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.